Very good.
So how's your garden?
Pardon me?
It makes it easier for people to see the screen if the lights aren't too bright. Sort of like the thumbnail down.
It also lost. And there's a thing, you know, mature. Like,
I'm going to mute the audio on our end for Zoom folks, and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes.
I'm not sure which one it is. Yeah.
you know, a lot of parts. So I got a lot of it done. So, you know, I was sitting there for like till 11 o'clock. So I got outside. And, you know, it's fun to have it, but I had to seal it. And I thought, really need to get the honey out. Go down there now, down to
Must make sure it's ready for
All right, can folks on Zoom hear me? Great. We are going to get started. Thank you so much for your patience. And I hope you all enjoy this amazing presentation by our fearless leader of the Arizona Native Plant Society, your friend and mine, Doug Ripley.
Oh, well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here for our first meeting in person and on Zoom. And thank you for your patience as we work through all of these technical issues. Before we start, I just want to remind people that in December, we're going to have our members showcase again. So if anyone out there, think about if there's something you would like to share in maybe a 15 or 20-minute presentation at the December meeting. Some of your adventures looking for plants, acquiring plants, cooking with our native plants, gathering seeds, starting them, whatever things you have done that you would like to share with our membership, that would be wonderful. And you can just contact myself, Susan Husband, or Janice Johnson, who's on the membership committee. Want to raise your hand, Janice? Or Georgette Mahalik, who's also on the membership, not membership, program committee. So let us know what you're thinking about. And then I'm so anxious to introduce Doug, who I think most of us know. But some things you might not know about Doug. He's a native of San Francisco, and he has BA and MA degrees in biology from San Francisco State, and also a PhD in plant ecology from Oregon State. And he was commissioned through the Air Force ROTC and served in the Air Force for 22 years as a botanist and a resource guide. He served in a lot of states, including Florida, California, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and even hung out at the Pentagon for a while. Also overseas was in Taiwan, the Republic of China, and Germany. And he has applied his extensive knowledge of botany in managing Air Force natural and cultural resources and conservation programs, which I never even thought about the Air Force and I guess our other military installations having places like that, but of course they do. At one point, he was responsible for 130 installations that occupied 8 million acres of land. So to me, that's just mind-boggling. He retired eventually from the Air Force, joined the Federal Civil Service, where he continued with management of natural resources and conservation for other branches of the military. And then he retired again to southeastern Arizona, where he now resides. And he and his wife, Arlene, have settled there, and he still volunteers with organizations such as the Nature Conservancy and of course the Arizona Native Plant Society, for which we are very thankful. So tonight he's going to share with us his work in one of what he calls the Lesser Sky Islands, the Dragoon Mountains, which have an incredible history, geology, flora, and fauna. And since retiring to Cochise County in 2008, Doug and his good friend Jim Verrier have combed the mountains, searching for plants and compiling a floristic catalog. And that's what we're going to be hearing about tonight. So please join me in welcoming Doug. Finally, we get to hear him. Okay.
That goes here. Okay. Thank you, Susie. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. I can see on some of your faces, who knew the Air Force had a botanist? But that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I was involved with environmental work for the Air Force, trying to ensure compliance with a number of environmental laws and so forth that relate to plants were a big part of it, but animals too, endangered species, wetland issues, and so forth. There was, Susie said, there was a heck of a lot of land out there, 9 million acres for the Air Force alone. But anyway, that's what I got involved with. Long story how I got there. Along the way, I also had a wonderful assignment teaching biology at the Air Force Academy in Colorado, which was just a really interesting opportunity. So I came in the Air Force never dreaming I was going to do anything like this, but it turned out really nicely for me, and I had a lot of interesting assignments and a lot of interesting work. So I was grateful for that. Well, as Susie said, I wound up in Cochise County when I finally retired, and been living here now for 17, 18 years. And when something presented itself like this, first thing I thought of was, well, it'd be fun to go out and start working on maybe doing a little floristic study of the Dragoon Mountains. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. However, this is going to be a real low-key thing. It's not going to have a lot of technical scientific data in it. It's more of a general overview of the Dragoon Mountains as I've come to know them, living there these years. And as Susie pointed out, my very good friend Jim Verrier, whom I think many of you may know, has been a partner in this effort with me. And we're still struggling, going along, trying to get this thing wrapped up. We're almost there, but we haven't quite finished it. So anyway, let me. Okay, there's the first problem. To advance the slides, what does one do? Oh, down, thank you. Okay. Well, this of course shows, I have a few slides that just show where the Dragoon Mountains are. And they're down here in Cochise County, right up there. As we mentioned, they're sometimes classified as a lesser of the Sky Islands, which are those famous, important, fantastic things that occur in southern Arizona. So the Chiricahuas, the Huachucas, the Whetstones, of course, Santa Catalina, all of these wonderful mountains that rise out of the desert and provide such a wonderful opportunity for other plants and animals and critters to grow from the desert floor. And the Dragoons are one of the smaller ones. But let's see, let's look at a little closer view of them. Here is Cochise County, and this is Tombstone, we all know, and they're the Dragoons up there, okay? So they're just a little bit south of Wilcox and to the west, and Benson, world famous Benson, is right here to the west a little further. My wife and I, Arlene, live right up here, right about a mile from the entrance to the western edge of the national forest. So it's a really great place there. Here's another view of these Sky Islands. This is from our good friend Frank Rose. I think many of you may have known Frank. He was one of the mainstays of the Arizona Native Plant Society and a wonderful person. Passed away about 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, Frank's book, this is from his Mountain Wildflowers of Southern Arizona, which is really a great book. If you don't have that, you should get it. So anyway, here's the Santa Ritas, the Huachucas, the Mule Mountains. There are the Dragoons, Huachucas in New Mexico, the Animas Mountains, the Penaleños up here, Galieros. So boy, talk about neat opportunities for places to explore and have a good time. Here's just another view of the Dragoons. They're not very big. They're only about 25 miles from tip to toe down here. And at the widest point, they're about maybe 12, 14 miles wide. So we're not talking about a huge area, but there's a great diversity of geology and botany and plants, animals, what have you. And of course, the history is probably one of the most interesting of all the Sky Islands. Okay. So the elevation, the highest point in there is only 7,523 feet. So we're not talking a big, huge mountain in this sense, but it's big enough. There is certainly, it gets your attention, particularly if you try to climb this sucker. It isn't that easy. Okay, well, the mountains are bordered on the west by the San Pedro Valley and, of course, the San Pedro River. Whoops. And they're all contained within the Coronado National Forest. And this is now looking to the east from the Stronghold Pass, which is the main, there's a real nice trail that crosses over the mountains east-west. And at the summit of that trail, you can see onto the other side, and that's looking due east in that direction. And that, of course, is the San Simon Valley on the east side. Okay, and then this is looking north from there. So you don't see tons of trees up there. It isn't like the Huachucas or the Chiricahuas. There are trees. There's only 2 species of pine, actually, that occur there. But you see some on these north-facing slopes, but there are not a ton of trees. And there's looking east again from the Stronghold Pass. Whoops, forgive me. These slides seem so repetitive. I don't know what's going on. Okay. And there's the Sulphur Springs Valley from this Middlemarsh Pass, which is the main road. It's just a dirt road, but it cuts across at the southern end of the mountains from the San Pedro Valley over to the Sulphur Springs Valley. So these are just a few little orientation shots here. The history of this area, of course, is extremely interesting, tragic in many respects. This was the home of the Chiricahua Apaches, who were pretty much done in by us, our ancestors. They had many treaties with the US, which were almost consistently broken, but they marshaled on as best they could. This, of course, I'm sure you recognize Geronimo. He was next to Cochise, the most famous of the Chiricahua Apaches. To his left there is Nacy, who was the son of Cochise. So Cochise was really the main guy here for many years. Things quieted down as far as the Apaches were concerned during the American Civil War, because so much of the US Army was pulled out and sent back east to fight the Civil War. But when the Civil War ended, the party was over and they were back and dealing with the Apaches. So a number of incidents and things happened which weren't great. But Cochise finally negotiated they finally negotiated with the Americans, the US Army, and he was, they set up a reservation. Up in San Carlos was one of the areas which the Apache weren't really crazy about. Anyway, so it's a long, complicated history. The upside is they finally faded away. Geronimo was the last major figure to die, which he did in, he was at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. He's buried there, actually. So he became quite a big, colorful figure later on in his life. But anyway, that's what happened there. But Cochise was the Dragoon Mountains was his favorite place, and he really, really liked that. And of course, the county was eventually named for him, but he died in 1868. Okay, well, moving on, here are some of the famous figures that have been involved with, that I've been involved with in this study. And there's Jim Verrier at the lower left-hand corner, who's just a wonderful guy. I think a lot of you probably know him. He had worked for many years with the Desert Survivors Nursery here in Tucson, but no longer is working there. He's now working as a private consulting contractor, but extremely knowledgeable guy. Good old George Ferguson from the UA Herbarium has done work out there, and I've worked with him a little bit. And Frank Reichenbacher has been working out there off and on for many years, like 40 years. And then good old Bryce Lindley, my good friend, has done a little work out there, and we've done some together. So those are just some of the people that I worked with. Okay, I guess before I finish with Cochise, this is a marker on the west side, east side rather, excuse me, of the mountains, which points out this gentleman, Thomas Jeffers, who was the one white person whom Cochise could establish an honest relationship with. And in fact, they became blood brothers, apparently. And so Jeffers kind of tried to look out for him and the Chiricahua Apaches and so forth. And it's been reported that the historical record is a little confusing or not difficult to interpret sometimes. But it's believed that Cochise is buried up in the stronghold of this main thing, and that Jeffers was there to supervise that things. So there, you know, it's not well documented, but that is seemed reasonably so. Okay, well, now we're going to take a little stroll through some of the habitat at the Dragoons. And so I'm going to show some of these features. Then I'm going to show you just some of the kind of communities of plants and animals that occur there. Just, and it's not in any way comprehensive, but rather just to show you some of the things that are out there to give you a flavor of what's there. So the big thing that really grabs you when you go out in this is geology. And the granite boulders are just spectacular. So these geological features date to, they're about 25 million years old. They've been uplifted or rather eroded away from where they were originally formed. And they weather in such a way that they're just unbelievably smooth corners and rounded edges and so forth. And there are all kinds of neat little things up there, such as mortars, pictographs, a number of them in the canyons that you can find when you hike up there. Council Rocks is a famous part on the western side where, in fact, it's called Council Rock because that's where, okay. Whoops, there we go. This is at the base of this area. It's a very interesting rock enclave. And it was there that Cochise actually negotiated his final surrender with the U.S. Army. And I forgot to mention there's the Dragoon. The name Dragoon is actually a military term that came from Dragoons are mounted soldiers on horses, and the U.S. Army had Dragoon components throughout the West, and they had ones that were here. And that's where the name came for the mountains. For some reason, they picked that for this. But there's this interesting little pyramidal mountain down here too. This is called Treaty. Well, it has a number of names, but it's called, one is Treaty Hill. And the story is that when the treaty was signed with the Army and Cochise, his son, Nasine, rode down there, rode up to the top of the mountain and put a white flag up there. So that's fairly well documented. Okay. Well, okay, now we're just going to, in a very broad sense, look at some of the communities that occur there. These are not specifically designated, but there are more general things that one would encounter as you go out there. And I'm going to show some of the plants and animals that one would find there. Okay, grasslands. The western and eastern slopes have really nice grasslands. However, the grasslands vary significantly depending on how much moisture is in any one given year. In some years, there's hardly any green grass at all. And then in other years, they're like this is a good year, and there's a lot of wildflowers and so forth. So anyway, I'm just thinking, I'm sorry, I'm kind of disorganized here, but I'm looking at Lynn Lovelace over here. Reminds me that there's another very famous place by the Dragoons, the Amarind Foundation, which is just to the north east of the Dragoon Mountains proper, is also another very interesting area. Lynn's done a ton of work there, and it's both historical as well as biological, and it's a neat museum. It's really something you might enjoy going out looking there. Okay, so there's the grasslands. Well, you have to forgive me because this little sucker. Oh, thanks, Andrew.
And I have a request from the chat. Could you use the mouse on the computer where you're pointing at things on the screen so that people can see what else is
Sure.
that.
Okay, will do. Well, thank you for that. So this is, again, the grasslands on the western slope. And it's been fascinating to see how these vary over time and vary with the conditions, particularly of rainfall. This was in a real good year. When by good year, I mean maybe 16, 17 inches of rain. On average, the long-term average is about 12 inches a year in this area. But it's interesting, when the circumstances are right, something like this, Calistromia, the Arizona caltrop, it's just everywhere. This year, there's not one flower out there, okay? So it's amazing how it can vary. Okay, here's looking to the west, same place. So here are some of the common wildflowers one would find in the grasslands. This is a very nice plant that you don't see too often. It too needs good moisture. Yucca lata is just a ubiquitous plant throughout the entire area, but it's really cool. This little zephyr lily is, I've seen this flower probably twice since I've been there. And I go back to the exact same place where I've seen it and it's never there. But then if it's in a wet year, it comes back. Devil's Claw, always popular. The Mormon tea is, of course, a very, very common plant in the Sonoran Desert and in southern Arizona. There's one species in the Dragoons, this one. There's some close-ups of it. This, of course, is a gymnosperm. It's not a angiosperm. It's not a flowering plant. So it produces cones, even though it doesn't look like a typical gymnosperm. It is. Bear grass, Nalina is everywhere. Chocolate flower. So anyway, these are, just flowers that I've taken since we got out there. Agave palmeri is extremely common. Now I'm going to cut in here. My wife Arlene is really into animal photography, insects, butterflies, and birds and mammals and stuff. So I plugged in some of her pictures, okay, in these different habitats where these are still in the grasslands. Okay, well, I guess my finger isn't too good here, forgive me. So anyway, grasses, here's some of the common ones you would expect. And now here's a few of the insects that Arlene has taken. Road satyr, more grasses. Gotta look at the time. I'm kind of lagging along here. Yes, thank you, Lynn. Okay, so as long as we're out of here by midnight, it's okay? Great, okay. Well, thanks, Andrew. You're so understanding. Okay. Again, I am just showing you these for what they're worth to see them. She's really got some really neat pictures of these. So these are all kind of grassland areas. She's also, some of these are organized by their host plant that they prefer. So these are all members of the mustard family that occur there, the wallflower, the bladderpod, draba. And these are some of the insects that have those plants as their host plant. Isn't that gorgeous? Um, like swallowtail on the thistle. So now moving on to the pea family. These are some host plants with peas. Dahlia. This is when I love the Birdsworth family, Aristolochiaceae. This very interesting flower. And it is host to the pipevine swallowtail caterpillar. So there's the caterpillar and there's the, of course, the plant around it. This is the only member of the citrus family that occurs there, Dutchman's breeches. Another plant that is very dependent on moisture, which goes absolutely bonkers when there's enough rain, is the Vigiera. Our first year we moved out there, this is what it looked like in the spring. This year, the plants germinated. They got about this tall and then they died. So there wasn't one flower in this whole area where I took this picture this year. And these are not big crowd pleaser plants, ragweed, cocklebur, but they are host plant to a number of butterflies. Okay. So moving on to some members of the sunflower family. Buckwheat, Polygonaceae, and russet thistle, of course, is not too popular with a lot of people, but it is, or pigweed. Interesting, all this thing I've been harping about the moisture, even the weedy species, there's other things going on. I mean, how you know it's not just moisture, but in some years, pigweed will just be everywhere. Everywhere. I haven't seen a pigweed in like 2 or 3 years now. You know, what about you, Lynn? Do you see those that you do? Uh-huh. I mean, they're not there at our, when I say there, I mean, it's on the western slope where I go most commonly. But same way with, so that of course is okay. But anyway, we can get through some more of these insects. The senna, these are all host plants for that. Okay, that's the insects. So There will be a little quiz on these at the end, so I hope you were taking notes, okay? But don't worry. Okay, let's look at some of the larger critters. American kestrel, God, what a gorgeous bird that is, huh? So I built, just at our little place, I put nest boxes all over, and we've had real good luck with American kestrels using those, as well as some other birds like, well, I guess the kestrels are the most common, but let's see, the ash-throated flycatcher, yes, they've been, this is the little box that I built. They've been very accommodating, but anyway, these are just some of the really neat birds there. Campbell's quail are everywhere. And there's the scaled quail and the Campbells. The scaled are less common, but we still have quite a few of them. When I say we have, these are like in our place, in our house. So there's a whole little brood of baby ones. And Swainson's honk, a lot of raptors, loggerhead shrike, Cass's kingbird, the common poor-will. They're a nocturnal species that come out at night and hang out on the roads and stuff. Roadrunner. And of course, the hummingbirds are really cool. The numbers vary, the number of different species vary from year to year. And again, I'm just saying on the one sample that we have where we live, maybe as many as 5 species will occur, but sometimes there's only 2 or 3. And there's the Scots oriole. So moving on to some mammals. There's the good old black-tailed jackrabbit. And this is one we really like. And of course, the famous Gila monster. And there is our favorite animal, the javelina, which I don't know how I got a picture of just one real one, because usually there's a group of about 50, you know, with like 12 babies and stuff. So anyway, ornate box turtle. They're not common, but we see them occasionally. Oh, this was a real big crowd pleaser. We have, well, Western Diamondback are really, really common there. And Arlene got this picture and she put it up on her page, and oh my God, people were going nuts over that. So anyway, rock squirrel, spotted ground squirrel. Okay, so that's the grasslands. So let's move on up the slope a little bit into the foothills more. And in many places where you go, the geology, of course, is just so cool. This, the granite that we see here. So this is on the western slope. And all kinds of stuff grows in between them. Opunctias, turpentine bush, oaks, the sotol, Dasyleurion, the yucca baccata, the Arizona yucca, which is very common there. We do have ferns. They're not a lot, but they typically grow in obviously moist areas and little seepages and things like that. Barberry, berberis, it's a common shrub. The shin-dagger is this agave shadii, which is quite an interesting plant. It affords protection to like a rainbow cactus here, because the name is quite appropriate, shin-dagger. You go trooping through this and these curved leaves are brutal. So it's something that you have to be careful how you approach it, but my goodness, what a beautiful plant it is. It produces these long stalks with these yellow flowers, and they're extremely fragrant to boot. So here's how they grow up with these big, there's Streety Hill in the distance, and this is at Council Rocks. But what a cool plant that is.
Oh,
Um, I think, in fact, in this, can you see there's a bee there? Oh, that's on the cactus. Well, who pollinates those? That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I think it's, sorry?
that's,
Oh, no, I don't, it's not bats, no. It's a typical, very fragrant. Yeah, so it could be moss, it could be other insects like bees. But anyway, it's really a neat plant. And so here's like a nice little rainbow cactus all snugly tucked away in the those spiny leaves. The ocotillo is ubiquitous well into the foothills and in fact even at higher elevations. The cholla, this one is very common there. Western acacia constricta, or whitethorn acacia, I should say. I guess that nomenclature on this is not correct. Those have been changed because we don't have acacias in Arizona anymore, as you may know. They're all gone. So, Lynn, is that Somalia? Do you know offhand? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not acacia. It's a long story how that happened, but anyway. So, okay, here's some of the insects in the foothills. And the barrel cactus, of course, are wonderful. Penstemon. This is one of the real crowd pleasers, is the claret cup, which has beautiful red flowers. And this isn't as beautiful as some are. They have many more flowers in some cases. This is also another interesting little plant you see here. It's called Selaginella, which is a primitive vascular plant. It's not a flowering plant, but it looks like a moss, but it's not a moss. It's a little higher up on the chain than that evolutionarily. But that too, you only see when there's moisture. I mean, it doesn't die out, but you see moisture. It needs moisture to turn green and become obvious. Actually. And here's the famous coral bean that Dr. Lovelace is the world's expert on. And she's done tons of interesting work on that. If you happen to attend our annual meeting last month in August, Lynn gave a very neat talk on this, which had a title you'll never forget. It's called Ants in Your Plants. And it was really great, Lynn. I love that. So I was talking about the pollinating insects that get in there, but Lynn's done a ton of work on that. And in the fall, it turns yellow on top of everything else. So it's a great plant. Okay, some of the conifers. This is the famous alligator juniper, which is very common there. Here's the juniper hair streak that uses that. Emery oak is probably, there's about at least 10 species of oak that we've come across, Jim and I, as well as others who've collected there. But the most common far and away is the good old emery oak, which is very, very common and a very attractive species. This was named for actually an Army officer, General Emery. He wasn't a general at the time, he was a major, but during the boundary surveys that were conducted through this area in the 1850s, he happened to be very interested in plants, and he collected all kinds of plants and sent them back to experts around the world in the East. People like Asa Gray at Harvard University and Engelman, who was in St. Louis. So he has a number of species that were named for him, which is kind of interesting. And he was quite a neat guy. He was also into anthropology and studied the Indians and so forth. Okay, so here's some more insects in this area. This is probably the second most common oak, the Mexican blue oak, Quercus oblongifolia. And some of the insects in that area. The good old manzanita is very, very common. Arctostaphylos pungens. Ceanothus gregii, which is in the parsley family. Fairy duster. Freekirt's blue. This is a very, very common plant, the globe mallow, Serratia angustifolia. This is a plant that when I showed the pictures of Rice Lindley in that little picture there, Rice did a lot of work on the taxonomy of this, trying to figure out, it's rather confusing and complicated. He did a lot of nice work on that. Okay. There's some more insects there. And the milkweeds, of course, are very popular insect plants. Butterflies particularly. Passion vine, this is not common there, but we have found it in several places, and it's of course a really very attractive plant. Old fritillary. Okay, well, let's look at some of the birds we might see up there. Black-chinned sparrow. The Montezuma quail, of course, is a real biggie. I mean, if you find that, it's not common, but it's not that rare. We come across it occasionally if you're hiking about and so forth. And it, of course, is just too much. Lucy's warbler, ladderback woodpecker. Okay, mammals. Mule deer are up there like crazy. They're not nearly as many of the other deer that are generally common to southern Arizona, namely the little guy, the cow's deer. But we have the mule deer is far and away the most common. Yeah, well, the cows is, I guess, a type of whitetail, a diminutive form of it. And this little guy, this is the only time we saw this. We were moved into our house for about a week and it showed up in the backyard. And I've never seen one since. But we had a friend had come across one way up higher in the Dragoons when he was up there just hiking around. So, I mean, they're there, they're just not that common. Okay, then I made this category of washes and riparian areas because they're especially interesting. There's really no year-round stream or water flow in the Dragoons, at least that I'm aware of. But about half the year, you'll find water somewhere flowing, again, depending on what the moisture regime is going on. This is one of the major creeks, Slavin Creek. There was a very large mine. I haven't gone into the history of mining here, but there's a long history of mining in the Dragoons that goes back many years. And there is one on the Slavin Creek. But along many of the rushes and so forth, we find, or washes rather, we find rabbit bush, the desert honeysuckle. This morning glory is really special. It only grows in a very restricted part of southeastern Arizona, Dragoons being one of them. So it's not at all common, and it's just mind-boggling how beautiful this is. This is about 6 or 7 inches in diameter, the flowers, and it grows in sandy washes and so forth. But it's in the Huachucas, in the Dragoons, some of the other areas there, but that's about it as far as its range. Velvet mesquite, of course, is everywhere. And these are some of the plants that like it especially, or butterflies. Hackberry, Celtis reticulata, is a very common tree. It provides very good fruit, although they don't look like they're that great. They're little hard green things, but birds seem to like them. And it also is a host plant to a number of butterflies. Cottonwoods along the riparian areas. The western soapberry. Does that have 2 P's in it? I don't think it should. Anyway, this is a very common tree there and very handsome, very attractive, and grows quite easily. The sycamores are very attractive, showy trees. In the autumn, they turn a brilliant yellow. In the winter, they lose all their leaves and have beautiful white stems. Arizona grape, again, in these riparian areas. Arizona walnut. Again, we're back at the Council Rocks area where there is a stream that flows through there. It's a little frustrating. I guess I shouldn't dwell on it too much, but of course, the entire Dragoon Mountains are grazed. Every square millimeter is grazed. It's leased to cattle ranching. They don't spare one single thing, which just burns the heck up out of me. I mean, so, you know, these ranchers pay like $2 an acre or something to put their cattle on it. And this area, for example, there's no areas that are off limit anywhere. So the most desirable ones, such as this, could easily be restricted, but they let them in and the cattle just decimate it. And it's all full of cow poop and so forth. But it somehow moves on, but I don't mean to be too harsh, but it is frustrating. So this is before the cows came in and take care of it. So this is the main stream that flows through the stronghold. And here's some more plants you'll encounter there. Hummingbird, summer tanager, spotted towhee. Okay, more canyons and woodlands. A very important tree that occurs there is the Arizona cypress, which is fairly restricted in where it occurs. It's not that rare. I mean, it occurs in the Santa Catalinas, but in this population that occurs in the Dragoons is really significant, although it is declining rather significantly. And Jim Verrier has undertaken some studies to look at that specifically as to why it is declining. But he came up with some ideas, but a lot of it is related to moisture, certainly, that it's diminishing. I didn't point out, but a lot of these really cool granite rocks are very, very popular for rock climbers. I mean, they're really famous. People come from all over to climb these. So oftentimes when you're up there, when we were up there, you'd find people climbing these rocks, and you look up, there's all kinds of literature about climbing them and so forth. It's a very, very popular thing. Again, in some of the really moist areas, you'll see plants that you quite wouldn't think maybe would be there, but here's some maidenhair fern. And of course, the beautiful golden columbine. growing in those moisture crevices and so forth. And the monkey flower. Okay, this is this is a very neat little plant. The Patagonia leather petal, Graptopetalum bartramii. This is a member of the it's a of the Crassulaceae, which is not a very common family in Arizona. But as you can see, it has these succulent leaves down at the base and then puts up this beautiful inflorescence. And good old George Ferguson has done a lot of study on this plant in the Dragoons, elsewhere too, but this is George scaling across this rock face, looking for Graptopetalum and trying to document what was there. This was all part of a study that was undertaken to provide some evidence whether this species warranted being listed as an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act. And this went on for a few years. George and others were doing work trying to document it. And the upshot was that it's rare enough that it really should be listed. And last year, I think within the last 2 years, it actually was listed as an endangered species under the Federal Endangered Species Act. This is on the trail that runs across the stronghold. It goes east-west. It's about 5 miles long from the western edge to the eastern edge on the other side. An important species there is the Chiricahua leopard frog, which is an endangered species. And that grows in that little reservoir that I just showed you, which is pretty neat. And this is now looking to the northeast. This is the one of the 2 pine species that occur there, the Chiricahua pine and the border pine, Pinus discolor. Those are the only 2 pine trees that grow there. And that raises some interesting questions, why there aren't more pine species, and in particular, ponderosa pine, which occurs in some of the other lesser sky islands like the Whetstones. Ponderosa pine is there, but there's none ever been found in the Dragoons, which doesn't surprise me too much because it just doesn't seem like ponderosa pine habitat too much, but you ought to see where it's growing over in the Whetstones, which are just to the west. And anyway, so here's madrone, which is common in the canyons, as is velvet ash, with not spelled with 2 A's. Mistletoe is fairly common there. There's another one. And some more of the insects. And so anyway, you get all the way up to the top of this Stronghold Pass that goes east-west, and these are some of the things you might see there. And we're almost done, I think. We were just chugging along there, Jim and I, several years ago, and we just came across this little nest with 2 baby red-tailed hawks in it, which was kind of cool. And then what was really cool was we came across a Mexican spotted owl, which, as you may know, is really a big deal. So it's a listed species. They're not common in the Dragoons. They occur in some of the bigger mountains like the Huachucas and the Chiricahuas, but certainly not there. But there he was, which was kind of amazing. Okay, so we're going to end with another interesting mammal, bats, okay? Now, these are ones we just took at our house, or Arlene did. And isn't that cool? You go out on your back porch and that's what's there. But unfortunately, these guys are really messy. So the walls are just coated with crap, you know. But anyway, they're very cool. Okay, well, that's kind of a strange presentation, I think, but it gives you a little overview of some of the neat things that grow up there. I haven't given you really anything from a scientific point of view, unfortunately, But I could tell you that when Jim and I particularly started working on this, there were about 600 known documented species, which we determined by going to SciNet. You know, you can go to SciNet and prescribe a particular geographical area, push a button, and whoop, it comes up with all the known collections that are in that area, which is just incredible. But anyway, there were about 600 species roughly when we did that initial study. Since that, we've added to it. So there's now, we have the total list that we have is 808 species for the mountain. And of those, so we have, nearly 200 new species that were not previously documented from there. There have been hundreds of collectors there over the years, going back to well back into the 19th century, but no one has comprehensively documented it. So that's what we hope we can finish and have come up with a nice flora or at least a list. Many of you may have seen Jim's book that he did on the Santa Catalina Mountains. So we're hoping we can do something like that, but oh boy, it's really a lot of work. But Jim has been really a soldier going on doing that. Okay, well, oh my, I'm kind of over here. Sorry. Okay, well, that's it, I think. Let me see. Yeah. So, anyway, thank you.
Doug, what are your study boundaries for the flora?
Yeah, well, roughly what, on that map that I showed you, it's fairly distinct, Whoops.
Stop your sharing so people
Oh.
can see.
Oh, that's scary.
There.
Oh, okay.
Stand over here a little bit so you can be on the camera.
Oh, okay. Oh.
At least the Zoom people can see something other than black.
Well, I'm sure the Zoom people are just thrilled, but anyway, thank you, Zoom people, for tuning in. So, we've just more or less, for example, where my house is 1 mile from the entrance to the stronghold. So that's just, we've just gone around the baseline of the mountains, basically. So it isn't terribly precisely prescribed, but anyway, that's where we are with that. And we've got a zillion specimens that we've worked up so far, but they haven't been really processed yet or deposited in the herbarium. Yes, Lynn?
Do you see any major differences or any noticeable differences between the east and the west side?
Yeah, that's a good question. There does seem to be not. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Lynn asked if there's any fairly obvious discernible differences between what one finds on the west side versus the east side. And this is all very speculative, but it seems like there's more woody vegetation, trees on the east side. Some of the little canyons and so forth really have quite a bit of the pines, of the 2 pines that do occur there, as well as the junipers and so on. But I think that's the only thing that I would, from the fairly superficial level we've evaluated that, would say. Yes. Right.
Yes, do you have the history on that reservoir up at the saddle?
No, I don't.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yes. The question was if we have any specific information about the reservoir, that cool thing it's right at the summit of the pass. Yeah. Yeah, it has. It must have been. So that's like some of the things that we're working on.
The CCC maybe, did they do it?
Could have been. I mean, that might have been something they worked on. There really isn't any other that's obvious CCC projects in that
Yeah.
area. Unlike, some of the other places like in the Pennsylvanians and so forth. But that's what we're working on trying to get more information on stuff like that. Because that's an excellent question. How in the heck, where did that come from?
Spring fed. It has to
Yes, exactly. It's spring fed. And well, it goes down, but there's usually water in it all the time. And the little frogs are living there permanently.
Hike there once, it's beautiful, and it's right by the Shaw House. And then there's a campground, and then you hike up to the reservoir. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is. It's very nice. So, anyway, I'm sorry I can't tell you much more than that, but we're working on it, trying to get that sort of information for the introductory parts of the flora. And there's many more things we could discuss, of course, about the geology and I mean, it's very complex. There's limestone, all kinds of stuff there that's really interesting.
So if you go to the saddle from the east and then continue west, where would you park a car down there to get back to the other car?
Where would you park on the west side?
Yeah, where's the end down? Where's the trailhead?
Oh, well, you can drive up. There's a Forest Service road that runs along the western edge of the
Yes.
mountain. It intersects the Middlemarch Road.
Yes. I see.
Come up Middlemarch, come up that Forest Service road. Just stay on it, and then it bends when it gets to the stronghold. It heads due east. And then it ends, and there are campsites there, and a lot of people camp there, and then that's where the trailhead is to head across the east. But it's a really nice, and there's a lot of campsites along that Forest Service road on the western ridge too. Quite a few people use that. And as I mentioned, a lot of these folks are rock climbers that are really, really into rock climbing. So, in fact, there have been several very interesting books written about climbing there and history and that sort of thing. But anyway, climbing Mount Glen is not that easy. There's no trail or anything, but it isn't horrendous, but it's not a trivial hike for most people, certainly not for me. So anyway. Okay, any other questions? Gee, well, thanks everybody for coming out. I really appreciate your coming, and thank you for being members of the Native Plant Society too, and participating in that. That's something that, well, when I got here in 2007, and I had been involved with Native Plant Societies elsewhere where I'd lived, like in Maryland, for example, and also in Washington, D.C. There's a Native Plant Society there, and that's where I lived. I worked in Washington, D.C., but lived in southern Maryland, about 30 miles away from the district. So I got really involved with those societies and had a lot of fun. So when I moved here, I naturally looked up the Native Arizona and this chapter, because we lived in Tucson first for about a year. And so I got involved with that. And while I was in the Tucson chapter, the president, a woman by the name of Barb Phillips, who's in Flagstaff, she had served as president for 4 or 5 years, I think. And she announced that she was retiring and there was nobody to replace her. So like an idiot, I said, okay, let me try it. Well, that was 15 years ago. Okay. So that gives me a chance to mention something. Who wants to be president? You would like, seriously, we're required under our bylaws of the society to have every 3 years an election for the board of directors. So we've kind of done that in a rather desultory way. And so we're gonna ramp up and do that properly. So we're gonna go out and do a call for people who would like to perhaps serve on the board of directors. There are 5 positions: president, vice president, treasurer, and a recording secretary and a, what's that, another secretary? Corresponding, thank you. And fortunately, once in a while, somebody cool like Andrew comes along. He volunteered to be the treasurer, which has been fantastic. But we're going to ask people to think about perhaps doing this, and I think you might enjoy it. So you look for that. Think about it. And if you're interested, we'll put your name on the hat, and then we're going to have a little election just online. It'll be a computer thing where you vote for the board of directors. So anyway, I just mentioned that to you because we really could use some more folks at that level. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doug.
Great.
I thought that came.